Yeah, what's up internet, Since Media here, and I have just been going crazy with frustration at a stupid issue, and I didn't know if that was something to talk about. And then I just thought, actually, we all struggle with issues and bugs, or not even bugs, just kind of problems in our configurations and with our software. And maybe not part of the job of a channel like this isn't just to show you when things work, but to actually talk about some of these silly issues. And perhaps this will help somebody if you ever come across this. I do a lot of work with Sonic Pi, generating chord sequences, sending them to FL Studio and recording or playing them on FL Studio instruments. If you've been watching recent videos, you might also remember that a few weeks ago I got very excited because this old program of mine called Gabloink, I finally figured out how it could talk to FL Studio. And here it is. These are bouncing around. It's sending things out to the generic MIDI Mapper in Windows. That is now forwarding it to FL Studio. I didn't have that working before, and the reason I didn't have that working before is that, because I had no MIDI Mapper to tell it. But then I found this Virtual MIDI Synth. I was very excited about the Virtual MIDI Synth by Coolsoft. So excited I gave them some money. And it has a MIDI Mapper built into this synth. So I set it to send the default, to set the default MIDI address on the computer to be LoopBe. That's the MIDI routing software I run that sends MIDI into FL Studio. So after I did that, Gabloink would now talk directly to FL Studio. I was very, very happy with this. So what happened? Well, I came along today to try to send some MIDI out of my Sonic Pi. Nothing, just silence. What's happened? What's wrong here? It's the same configurations, MIDI, if we look at the preferences, MIDI out, MIDI in, there's these different synths here, MIDI out channel, all channels, MIDI outputs, this variety. I'm sending to LoopBe, internal MIDI, okay? And this is listening to LoopBe, right? It's still listening to LoopBe. That's the input. So why am I not hearing anything? That was the question. So I thought it's got to be something to do with this virtual synth that I've installed. So I tried kind of turning it off and nothing, couldn't get it to work. So what did I end up realizing? Well, here I'm sending it to LoopBe internal MIDI, but somehow, one thought was these have got these channels. If we look here again, MIDI outputs, we'll see that LoopBe has now gone on to port 3. So is it this? Let's try this. No, I thought that was going to solve my problem. It seemed like it was now port 3. Didn't work. So after a lot of faffing, what I've discovered is that I should send it through the Coolsoft MIDI Mapper. Somehow that seems to be taking precedence on port 0 over the LoopBe, or at least now. Chords are coming again. So that was what the story was, and that was the fix. You need the port on the Sonic Pi to now go, well, now I've installed this CoolSoft Virtual MIDI Synth. It's taken control of the default MIDI Mapper. It seems to put itself on port 0, so it doesn't seem to make any difference. The issue isn't what I do here. It's still taking control of the MIDI Mapper. It's sending that out on LoopBe. So LoopBe is still in the loop. It's still in the chain somewhere. But this Sonic Pi, you can't now put in LoopBe internal MIDI for the output. Now I've installed that Virtual Synth and that MIDI Mapper, it seems like I now need to use that as part of the routing to get MIDI out of Sonic Pi and into FL Studio. But finally it does work. So at least I've solved the problem, and I hope that might help some of you who are kind of following along with some of the stuff I'm experimenting with here, because it is a huge frustration to work with music on computers. Linux particularly difficult, but even Windows, they don't support it. You know, for a lot of these operating system companies, I mean, I can't speak about Apple, perhaps they do a good job, but music and audio is always a bit of a second-class citizen compared to video or other things that they want you to do. They don't want you to write music on your computer somehow. But we're going to write music, and hopefully this might help some of you. That's it. Thanks for watching. That's today's session.